The galaxy had seen many wars. For thousands of years, powerful alien empires fought each other for territory, power, and pride. Some wars lasted for centuries. Entire star systems were destroyed. Civilizations rose and fell like waves in a dark ocean. But there was one species of galaxy never fully understood. Humans. Compared to many alien races, humans were young. Their technology grew fast. Their armies learned quickly, and their leaders made decisions that often confused the rest of the galaxy. But the most dangerous thing about humans was something else. They never gave up. And that was exactly why the final war had begun. Far away from Earth, in a quiet region of space, a massive alien fleet gathered near a cold and silent planet. The ships were enormous, some of the size of cities. Their armor was dark and heavy, built for the most brutal battles. Thousands of warships floated in perfect formation. They belonged to the Karthul Dominion. The Karthul were the last great military power left in the galaxy. For centuries they had watched other empires fall during the human expansion wars. One by one, powerful species tried to stop humanity, and one by one they failed. Now only the Karthul remained. Inside the largest flagship, Supreme Commander Vrax stood in the main command hall. The room was wide and filled with glowing screens and tactical displays. Officers moved quickly between stations, checking weapons and scanning the surrounding space. Commander Vrax watched the star map carefully. A small blue symbol blinked in the center of the screen. Earth. He narrowed his glowing red eyes. For 2 centuries, Vrax said slowly, the humans have spread across the galaxy like a disease. One of his officers looked up from a control panel. But many empires tried to destroy them, Commander, the officer said carefully, and all of them failed. Vrax turned toward him. That is because they were weak, he said coldly. The room became quiet. The Karthul Dominion is not weak. The officers nodded quickly. For months, the Karthul had prepared for this war. Their scientists studied human weapons. Their spies watched human fleets. Their engineers built new weapons designed to break human defenses. They believed they were ready. Today they would prove it. Another officer suddenly spoke. Commander, long-range sensors are detecting movement. Vrax stepped closer to the main display. How many ships? The officer paused for a moment, confused. Only one. The room filled with quiet whispers. One ship? Vrax asked. Yes, Commander. The screen zoomed in. A single human vessel slowly appeared on the display. It was small compared to the giant Karthul warships. Its design looked strange, almost old. The armor was dark gray and covered with marks from previous battles. It did not look like a modern human battleship. It looked ancient. Some officers began to laugh. Is this a joke? One of them said. Did the humans send a scout ship to surrender? Another officer smiled. Maybe they know they cannot win. But Commander Vrax did not laugh. He stared at the image carefully. Something about the ship felt wrong. Run a deep scan, he ordered. The sensor officer began working quickly. A few seconds later his face changed. Commander, I am detecting unusual energy readings. What kind of readings? I do not know, the officer admitted. The power source does not match any known human reactor. Another officer leaned forward. That ship is ancient, he said. Our historical records show similar designs from early human expansion. Commander Vrax crossed his arms. Open a communication channel. The signal connected immediately. For a few seconds there was only silence. Then a calm human voice filled the command hall. This is Human Defense Vessel Atlas. You have entered restricted territory. The voice sounded steady and confident. Commander Vrax smiled slightly. You are alone, he said, and you are facing the largest fleet in the galaxy. The human voice answered without fear. That is correct. The officers exchanged confused looks. Vrax leaned closer to the microphone. Human vessel, he said. You are ordered to surrender immediately. The reply came almost instantly. No. The simple answer surprised everyone in the room. Commander Vrax laughed quietly. You are brave, he said, but bravery will not save you. The human voice remained calm. We are not here to be saved. A strange feeling spread through the command hall. The conversation felt wrong. Vrax decided to end the discussion. "You have one final chance," he said. "Leave this system and tell your leaders that humanity has lost this war." There was a short pause. Then the human voice spoke again. "No." Several officers shook their heads in disbelief. Commander Vrax sighed. "So be it." He raised one clawed hand. "All ships," he ordered, "target the human vessel." Outside the flagship, thousands of Karthul weapons slowly aimed toward the small human ship. Massive plasma cannons glowed with bright blue light. Missile bays opened. Railgun systems prepared to fire. One small human ship faced the entire fleet. Inside the Karthul command hall, officers waited eagerly. The battle would end in seconds. Commander Vrax gave the final command. Fire! Thousands of weapons activated at the same time. But nothing happened. The cannons did not shoot. The missiles did not launch. The railguns stayed silent. The officers stared at their screens in confusion. "What is happening?" one shouted. The weapons officer looked down at his console. "Commander, our systems are not responding." Another officer spoke quickly. "Navigation is offline. Shield generators are shutting down. Communications are failing." Panic spread across the command hall. Commander Vrax slammed his claw against the control station. "Explain." The sensor officer looked terrified. "Commander, something is interfering with our technology." Vrax turned toward the main screen. The small human ship still floated quietly in space. It had not fired a single weapon, yet the entire Karthul fleet was suddenly helpless. The human voice returned to the communication channel. "We warned you." Commander Vrax growled. "What have you done?" The human answered calmly. "We turned off your toys." Shock filled the room. "That is impossible," an officer shouted. The human ship slowly began moving forward. Without shields or working weapons, the Karthul fleet could only watch. Commander Vrax felt anger rising inside him. "This changes nothing," he said loudly. He turned toward his officers. "Prepare manual combat systems." Several officers looked surprised. "Commander, our ships were built for war," Vrax continued, "even without advanced systems. Mechanical backup weapons still existed. Old technology. Primitive systems that did not rely on advanced networks. The officers quickly began activating them. Slowly, the fleet started regaining limited control. Commander Vrax smiled. "Humans are clever," he said, "but they are not invincible." On the screen, the ancient human ship continued drifting closer. The sensor officer suddenly gasped. "Commander, new readings." "What now?" The officer's voice shook. "I am detecting multiple signals coming from the human vessel." "How many?" The officer swallowed. "Hundreds." The front of the human ship slowly opened. Large metal doors separated. From the darkness inside, shapes began to move. Small war machines. Hundreds of them. Then thousands. Commander Vrax stared at the screen. The machines spread into space like a swarm. But these were not normal drones. Their designs looked different. Heavy, aggressive, built for brutal combat. The sensor officer checked the scans again. "Commander, these machines are not using advanced control systems." Vrax frowned. "What does that mean?" "They cannot be disabled like our technology." The realization spread through command hall like cold water. The humans had planned this. The ancient ship was not a weakness. It was a trap. The human voice spoke one more time. "You challenge humanity." Commander Vrax clenched his claws. "Yes," he said angrily. "And now you will learn something important." The human voice became colder. When humanity stops fighting with modern weapons, a massive swarm of human war machines accelerated toward the helpless Karthul fleet. That is when the real war begins. Space around the frozen planet suddenly came alive. Thousands of human war machines moved out from the ancient ship Atlas. They spread across the dark battlefield like a metal storm. Their engines were small but powerful. Their shapes were simple, heavy, and brutal. They were not beautiful machines. They were built for only one purpose: war. Inside the Karthul flagship, alarms continued to scream. Red warning lights filled the command hall. Commander Vrax watched the screen with growing anger. "How many machines?" he demanded. The sensor officer answered quickly. "Over 4,000, and more are still launching." Vrax slammed his claw against the control table. "They are only machines. Destroy them." One officer shook his head. "Commander, our main weapons are still offline. The interference is blocking most advanced systems." "Then use the manual weapons." Across the Karthul fleet, mechanical defense cannons slowly turned. Old systems powered by direct wiring and physical controls began to activate. These weapons were ancient by galactic standards, but they still worked. Outside, the first wave of human machines rushed forward. Karthul cannons opened fire. Bright explosions filled the darkness. Several human machines were destroyed instantly. Pieces of metal scattered across space. But the swarm did not stop. They kept moving. Fast. Relentless. Inside the human ship Atlas, the command bridge was quiet. The room was smaller than most modern military bridges. The equipment looked old. Many controls were physical switches and metal levers. At the center of the room sat an old man, Admiral Nathan Hale. His gray hair was short and deep lines marked his face. His eyes were calm, but they carried the weight of many wars. He had fought in the first human conflicts beyond Earth, wars that the rest of the galaxy barely remembered. A young officer stood beside him. "Admiral," she said, watching the screen, "the Karthul are activating manual defense weapons." Admiral Hale nodded slowly. "Of course they are." The officer looked curious. They adapted faster than expected. Hale gave a small smile. War forces creatures to learn quickly. He watched as several more human machines were destroyed. But for every machine destroyed, 10 more moved forward. "Launch the second wave," he said calmly. More hangar doors opened. Another swarm of war machines rushed into space. Inside the Karthul flagship, Commander Vrax watched with growing frustration. "They keep coming." One officer said nervously, "How many machines does that ship carry?" Another officer studied the scans. "Commander, we believe the entire ship is a carrier." "A carrier?" "Yes." The internal structure appears hollow. It was designed to transport thousands of these war machines. Commander Vrax growled. "So the humans brought an army inside one ship." The sensor officer suddenly spoke again. "Commander, the machines are approaching our outer fleet." The first human machines reached the nearest Karthul destroyers. Small weapons opened fire from their armored bodies. Explosions hit the alien ships. Armor cracked. Engines failed. One destroyer exploded in a bright flash. Another ship lost control and drifted into a nearby cruiser. Inside the command hall, officers began shouting, "We are losing ships." Defense grid collapsing. Commander Vrax forced himself to stay calm. "The humans are using numbers," he said, "but machines can be destroyed." He turned toward the weapons officer. "Prepare heavy kinetic launchers." The officer looked surprised. "Those weapons are extremely primitive. Commander, I do not care." Moments later, giant mechanical cannons activated across the Karthul fleet. Instead of energy beams, they fired massive metal projectiles. The cannons thundered. Huge metal rounds flew across space. When they hit the human machines, the results were brutal. Dozens of machines shattered instantly. Fragments drifted away like broken insects. For the first time, the swarm slowed. Inside the Atlas, the young officer frowned. "Admiral, the Karthul are adapting." Hale watched the battle quietly. "Yes." More machines exploded on the screen. The officer looked worried. "At this rate, we may lose most of the swarm." Admiral Hale leaned back in his chair. "That was always part of the plan." She looked confused. "Sir," Hale pointed at the main display. "Watch carefully." The human machines that survived the heavy cannon fire suddenly changed their movement. Instead of flying directly toward the fleet, they split into smaller groups. They moved around the enemy's ships. Behind them, between them, inside the Karthul flagship, the sensor officer noticed a change. "Commander, the machines are spreading across the fleet." Vrax frowned. "What are they doing?" Then another officer shouted, "They're attaching to our ships." Small human machines landed on the hulls of several Karthul vessels. Mechanical arms locked into the alien armor. Moments later, boom! Small explosions burst across the fleet, not large enough to destroy the ships, but powerful enough to damage critical systems. Engines failed. Weapon mounts shattered. Communication towers exploded. The Karthul fleet slowly began losing coordination. Commander Vrax stared in disbelief. They are dismantling us. Just then, another officer spoke with fear in his voice. Commander, the human ship is moving closer. Vrax turned back to the screen. The ancient ship Atlas was slowly drifting toward the center of the fleet. Silent, calm, untouchable. Inside the human bridge, Admiral Hale watched the same screen. Distance, he asked. 10,000 kilometers, the officer replied. Good. Hale stood up slowly. The officers on the bridge immediately focused on him. For the first time, his calm face looked serious. Prepare the silence network. The young officer hesitated. Admiral, are you sure? That system has not been used for decades. Hale nodded. Yes. She lowered her voice. The galaxy asked humanity never to activate again. Hale looked at the screen. Outside, another Karthul cruiser exploded. Today, he said quietly, the galaxy will remember why. The officer slowly activated a series of controls. Deep inside the ancient ship, massive hidden systems began to wake. Energy flowed through old circuits. Large antennas extended from the ship's surface. A strange invisible wave began spreading across the battlefield. Inside the Karthul flagship, alarms suddenly returned. The sensor officer looked terrified. Commander, a massive signal is spreading from the human ship. What kind of signal? We do not know. Across the fleet, systems began failing again. Even the manual backup system started shutting down. Commander Vrax felt cold fear growing inside him. That should be impossible. The officer stared at the readings. Commander, this is not an attack on our weapons. What do you mean? It is attacking the basic technology inside every ship. The realization hit the room like a shock. The humans were not disabling weapons. They were disabling technology itself. Outside, the battlefield slowly went silent. Karthul ships drifted helplessly. Engines dead. Weapons dead. Systems dead. Only the ancient human ship remained active. Commander Vrax whispered in disbelief. What kind of weapon is this? Inside the Atlas, Admiral Hale looked at the display. The silence network is fully active, the officer confirmed. Hale nodded. Good. But suddenly another alert appeared. Admiral, we are detecting movement. From where? The Karthul flagship. On the screen, a group of smaller alien ships launched from the giant flagship. They were older designs. Primitive. No advanced systems. The sensor officer understood immediately. Admiral, they are using ships that cannot be affected by the silence network. Hale smiled slightly. Smart. The young officer looked concerned. They are heading straight for us. The alien ships accelerated. Even without advanced technology, they were still dangerous. Inside the Karthul flagship, Commander Vrax watched the attack group launch. If technology will not save us, he growled, then we fight the old way. The ships raced toward the human vessel. Inside the Atlas, the officer asked quietly, Admiral, should we retreat? Hale shook his head. No. He looked at the approaching enemy ships. Open the lower hangars. The officer activated the command. Massive doors slowly opened beneath the ancient human ship. From the darkness inside, something enormous began to move. The young officer stared at the screen. Admiral, huge machines stepped into the open hangar. Not small drones. Not tiny attack units. These were giant war machines. Heavy armored bodies. Massive weapons mounted on their arms. Machines built for close combat. For brutal war. The officer whispered in shock. Those designs are centuries old. Hale nodded slowly. Yes. The giant machines powered up. Engines roared. Weapons activated. The Karthul attack ships were getting closer. Admiral Hale gave the final order. Deploy the Titans. The giant war machines launched into space. And for the first time since the battle began, Commander Vrax felt real fear, because humanity had just revealed something the galaxy had forgotten. Humans never throw away old weapons. They improve them. The battlefield around the frozen planet had changed. Only a short time ago, the Karthul Dominion fleet had filled space with power and confidence. Their ships were strong, their weapons advanced, and their commanders believed victory was certain. Now everything was different. Most of the Karthul ships floated helplessly in the darkness. Their engines were silent. Their shields were gone. Their powerful weapons were useless. The silence network had done its job. Only a few small attack ships still moved toward the ancient human vessel Atlas. These ships were older designs. They used simple mechanical systems that the silence network could not fully stop. Inside those ships, Karthul pilots prepared for a desperate attack. Inside the human ship, something else was preparing. The massive hangar doors beneath Atlas were open, and from the darkness inside, the Titan war machines were launching. They were enormous. Each Titan was nearly the size of a small spacecraft. Thick armor covered their bodies. Their heavy engines pushed them forward with slow but powerful movement. They looked less like machines and more like giant armored soldiers. Inside the command bridge of Atlas, Admiral Nathan Hale stood quietly, watching the battle. A young officer beside him studied the incoming Karthul ships. "Admiral," she said, "enemy attack craft will reach us in 2 minutes." Hale nodded. "Titans ready?" "Yes, Admiral." 12 units deployed. The officer zoomed the screen closer. The giant machines moved through space like silent guardians. "Sometimes," Hale said calmly, "the galaxy forgets something important." The officer glanced at him. "What is that, sir?" Hale looked back at the screen. That humans never stop preparing for the next war. Outside, the Karthul attack ships accelerated. Inside one of the lead ships, Captain Reth controlled a manual flight system with both claws. His ship shook slightly as the engines pushed to maximum power. Ahead of him floated the human vessel. But something large was moving between them. The Titans. Reth stared at the giant machines. "What are those things?" he whispered. Another pilot's voice came through the communication channel. "They are blocking the path." Reth growled. "Destroy them." The Karthul attack ships opened fire. Old plasma cannons and missile launchers roared to life. Bright explosions flashed around the Titans. One Titan was hit directly. Its armor cracked, and part of its shoulder exploded. But the machine did not stop. Instead, the Titan slowly raised one massive arm. A heavy rail cannon fired. The projectile smashed directly into a Karthul attack ship. The alien vessel shattered instantly. Fragments of metal and fire scattered through space. The remaining Karthul pilots felt fear rising. "These machines are too strong," one pilot shouted. Another Titan moved forward. Its arm opened, revealing several missile pods. The missiles launched and streaked toward the enemy ships. 2 more Karthul vessels exploded. Inside the command hall of the Karthul flagship, Commander Vrax watched in growing horror. The battle display showed the destruction clearly. "These machines," he said quietly, "they are unstoppable." An officer shook his head. "No, Commander. They are just very well armored." Vrax turned toward him. "Then find a way to destroy them." The officer quickly scanned the battlefield. Then his eyes widened. "Commander, we still have one weapon available." Vrax narrowed his eyes. "What weapon?" "The Starbreaker cannon." The room fell silent. Several officers looked shocked. "Commander, that weapon is extremely dangerous," one said carefully. "It was designed for planetary destruction." Vrax growled. "I know exactly what it was designed for." The officer hesitated. "But firing it at close range could damage our own fleet." Vrax looked at the screen again. Another Karthul ship exploded under Titan fire. "If we do nothing," he said coldly, "there will be no fleet left to damage." He raised his claw. "Prepare the Starbreaker cannon." Across the Karthul flagship, emergency systems activated. Deep inside the enormous warship, a massive weapon slowly powered up. The cannon was huge. Its barrel stretched across almost the entire length of the ship. Energy began gathering inside the weapon chamber. Inside Atlas, warning alarms suddenly sounded. The sensor officer looked at the readings with concern. "Admiral, We are detecting massive energy buildup inside the enemy flagship. Hale stepped closer. Identify the weapon. The officer studied the data. Then her expression changed. Admiral, it is a Starbreaker cannon. The room became quiet. Another officer spoke softly. That weapon can destroy entire planets. Hale watched the screen carefully. They are desperate. The young officer looked worried. If they fire at us, the Titans will not survive. Hale nodded slowly. Yes. She looked at him. Should we retreat? Hale remained silent for a moment. Then he shook his head. No. Instead, he walked to another control panel. It was older than most of the other equipment on the bridge. A red cover protected a single switch. The young officer stared at it. Admiral, that system. Yes, Hale said quietly. The second protocol. The officer swallowed. Sir, that weapon has never been used. Hale lifted the protective cover. Let's hope it works. Outside, the Starbreaker cannon finished charging. Commander Vrack stood proudly on the command platform. Target the human vessel. The giant cannon slowly turned. Its bright core glowed like a small star. Inside Atlas, the sensor screamed. Admiral, enemy weapon ready to fire. Hale placed his hand on the switch. Activate the stellar response system. The officer pressed a command. For a moment, nothing happened. Then something strange appeared on the sensor screens. Admiral, the officer whispered. The nearby star. Everyone looked at the display. The yellow star in the system had begun to change. Its energy output suddenly increased. Solar flares erupted across its surface. Massive waves of radiation spread outward. Commander Vrack saw it too. What is happening to the star? The sensor officer panicked. Commander, the star's activity is increasing rapidly. Vrack stared at the readings. That is impossible. Inside Atlas, the young officer spoke again. Admiral, the stellar response system is working. Hale nodded. Long ago, human scientists created a secret weapon. Not a cannon, not a missile. Something far more terrifying. A system that could influence the energy balance of nearby stars. Not destroy them, but wake them. Outside, the star released a massive solar eruption. Radiation waves crashed across the battlefield. Karthul ships began overheating. Damaged systems exploded. Inside the flagship, alarms screamed everywhere. Commander, hull temperature rising. Power systems failing. Vrax realized something terrible. The humans had turned the star itself into a weapon, but he refused to surrender. Fire the cannon, he roared. The Starbreaker cannon unleashed its beam. A massive blast of energy shot toward Atlas. But the Titans moved instantly. 3 giant machines pushed themselves into the path of the beam. The energy waves smashed into them. 2 Titans were destroyed instantly, but the third survived just long enough. Its armored body redirected part of the beam away from the human ship. The blast missed Atlas and disappeared into space. Commander Vrack stared in disbelief. No! Inside Atlas, Admiral Hale watched silently. Star reaction increasing. The officer reported. Within minutes, the radiation would destroy all remaining Karthul ships. Hale nodded slowly. The battle was almost finished. But then the sensors detected something new. The officer's voice shook. Admiral, long-range scans show Karthul colonies in nearby systems. Hale understood immediately. Even if the fleet died here, the species would survive. The war would continue. For years, maybe centuries. Hale walked back to the control panel. Another switch waited beneath a sealed cover. The officer stared at it in fear. Admiral, that is the final protocol. Yes, that system was never meant to be used. Hale looked at the burning battlefield. Neither was this war. He slowly lifted the cover. Prepare the archive eraser. The officers on the bridge froze. Because every human in the room knew what that weapon meant. A weapon that did not destroy ships. A weapon that did not destroy planets. A weapon designed for only one purpose. To erase an entire species from existence. And far away in the dying Karthul flagship, Commander Vrax suddenly whispered in fear. Humans, what have you done? The battlefield was no longer a normal war zone. Space around the frozen planet had turned into chaos. The nearby star was unstable now. Bright waves of solar fire burst from its surface again and again. Radiation storms rolled through the system like violent tides. Damaged Karthul ships drifted helplessly. Some were burning. Some were breaking apart. Others were simply silent. The once powerful fleet of the Karthul Dominion was falling apart. But inside the largest flagship, Commander Vrax refused to accept defeat. Red warning lights flashed across the command hall. The air was hot, and smoke filled parts of the room. Many control stations had stopped working. Officers struggled to keep basic systems active. "Commander!" one officer shouted. "Hull temperature critical." Another voice followed. "Life support failing in 3 sections." Commander Vrax ignored the panic. His glowing eyes stayed locked on the central display. At the center of the battlefield floated the ancient human ship, Atlas, calm, untouched, surrounded by the remaining Titan war machines. Vrax slowly clenched his claws. All this destruction from one human ship. An officer spoke carefully. "Commander, our fleet cannot continue this battle." Vrax turned toward him sharply. "Explain." "Even if we survive the star radiation, our weapons are gone. Our systems are damaged. Our ships cannot fight anymore." The officer paused before speaking again. "Commander, the war is lost." For a long moment, the command hall was silent. Then Vrax slowly shook his head. "No." The officers stared at him. "We are the Karthul Dominion," he said quietly. "We do not lose wars." But deep inside his mind, Vrax felt something new. Fear, because he now understood something terrible. Humanity had not come here just to win. They had come to end the war completely. Inside the human vessel Atlas, the bridge was calm again. Most of the fighting had stopped. The Titans floated near the ship like silent guardians. Admiral Nathan Hale stood beside the command console. The red emergency light above the final switch glowed softly. The archive eraser, a weapon so secret that most of the galaxy did not know it existed. Even many humans had never heard of it. The young officer beside Hale looked uneasy. "Admiral, the system is ready." Hale nodded. "Status of the enemy fleet?" 70% destroyed. The rest will not survive the radiation storm." Another officer looked at the long-range scanners. However, Karthul colonies still exist in 3 nearby star systems. Hale already knew that. If those colonies survived, the war would continue. Maybe not today, maybe not tomorrow, but one day they would rebuild their fleets. One day they would return. And humans had learned a hard lesson long ago. Some wars must never be allowed to start again. The young officer looked at Hale again. "Admiral, if we activate the archive eraser..." She stopped speaking. She did not need to finish the sentence. Everyone on the bridge understood. The Karthul species would disappear. Not just their fleets. Not just their soldiers. Every colony. Every hidden base. Every surviving Karthul life form. Gone. Hale stood quietly for several seconds. He had seen many wars in his long life. He had watched planets burn. He had seen humans die by the millions. He had also seen something else. What happened when humanity showed mercy to enemies who promised peace and later attacked again. He looked out at the battlefield. Broken ships floated everywhere. The Titans were still watching. The star burned brighter with every minute. War had already taken enough lives. Now there was only one question left. How to end it? "Open communication channel," Hale said quietly. The officer nodded. "Channel open." Across the battlefield, the signal reached the damaged Karthul flagship. Inside the command hall, Commander Vrax heard the human voice again. "This is Admiral Nathan Hale of the Human Defense Fleet." Vrax stepped forward slowly. "You have destroyed our fleet," he said. "What more do you want?" Hale answered calmly. "I am giving you one final choice." The command hall became silent. "What choice?" Vrax asked. "Order your remaining colonies to surrender." Hale said, "Surrender completely. Disarm your forces. Accept human supervision." Several Karthul officers looked shocked. That was not surrender. That was submission. Vrax's eyes burned with anger. "You expect the Karthul Dominion to become your prisoners?" "No," Hale replied. I expect your species to survive. Those words surprised everyone in the room. For the first time, the humans were offering mercy. Vrax laughed bitterly. You fear us. Hale's voice remained calm. No. Then why offer mercy? Because extinction should always be the last choice. The command hall was quiet again. Some officers looked hopeful. Maybe the war could end. Maybe their species could survive. But Commander Vrax slowly shook his head. No. The officers turned toward him in shock. Commander, one whispered. Vrax raised his head proudly. The Karthul Dominion does not kneel. Hale listened silently from the human ship. You would rather see your species die? He asked. Yes, Vrax said. If the choice is between slavery and death, we choose death. Inside the human bridge, several officers looked disturbed. But Admiral Hale only closed his eyes for a moment. He had hoped for another answer. When he opened his eyes again, his face was calm. Very well, he said quietly. Inside the Karthul flagship, Commander Vrax gave one final order. Fire every remaining weapon at the human ship. The damaged fleet tried to obey. A few surviving cannons fired weak energy blasts toward Atlas. The attacks barely touched the Titans. Inside the human ship, the officers looked at Hale. The decision had been made. Hale slowly reached toward the final switch. The archive eraser. Activate it, he said. The officer pressed a command. Deep inside the ancient ship, hidden systems began to wake. Across the galaxy, small silent devices hidden in deep space suddenly activated. Devices humanity had placed centuries ago. The systems searched for one thing. Karthul DNA. Inside the Karthul flagship, the sensor officer suddenly screamed. Commander! Vrax turned. What now? Biological systems failing. Another officer grabbed his chest in pain. Several Karthul soldiers collapsed. Across their fleet, the same thing was happening. Across their colonies, far away in other star systems, the same silent signal arrived. Within minutes, every Karthul life form in the galaxy began to disappear. Not with explosions, not with fire, just silence. Inside the flagship, Commander Vrax fell to one knee. His vision blurred. His breathing became weak. He understood what had happened. Humanity had not destroyed the Karthul. They had erased them. With his final strength, Vrax whispered one last sentence. Humans are monsters. Then he fell. His body went still. The Karthul Dominion was gone. Inside the human ship, the officers watched the monitors. One by one, every Karthul signal disappeared. The long-range scanners confirmed the result. Admiral, the Karthul species is extinct. No one celebrated. No one cheered. The bridge remained silent. Admiral Hale looked at the dark battlefield. Then he spoke quietly. Deactivate the silence network. The system slowly powered down. The Titans returned to their hangars. The ancient ship turned away from the dying system. Before leaving, the young officer asked a question. Admiral, do you think the galaxy will fear humanity now? Hale looked at the distant stars. Yes, he said softly. But fear is not what we wanted. Then what did we want? Hale watched the quiet universe. Peace. The human ship Atlas slowly disappeared into the darkness of space. And across the galaxy, a new lesson spread among every surviving civilization. Humanity does not start wars. But if pushed far enough, humanity ends them forever.